Hey everyone, you can already tell from the intro this is getting serious. We're talking about money. Specifically, we're talking about your cloud provider bill. According to Gartner, this year cloud provider cost is going to hit $679 billion, and that is up 20% from last year. That is a lot of money. 70% of companies say that over-provisioned Kubernetes is a major driver in that cost explosion. So what the hell is wrong with Kubernetes, right? A lot of you are engineers, you probably know Kubernetes. A lot of companies are basing their tech stack on Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is super popular. That means they spin up a separate cluster for each team, right? Each engineering team, for each customer in production, for each environment that they want to test in something, right? So many Kubernetes clusters. A lot of folks that we speak with at like Fortune 500 companies, they have like thousands of Kubernetes clusters. So if we're looking at the cost of Kubernetes, how much does that cost, right? So we have the cluster fee that is $876 per Kubernetes cluster times 1,000. Well, there's $1 million a year right here, right? And coincidentally, that fee is the same in each cloud, right? Not talking about a cartel here, but interesting. And then we have all this technology running in Kubernetes before you even deploy any of your own applications. You're deploying things like networking, like Istio, right? Really complex things. Storage, monitoring, compliance, security tools in each cluster 1,000 times, right? That is a lot of compute that you now need in your Kubernetes clusters. And we were the only ones that looked at this and said like, hey, you know, optimization and little incremental automations and improvements is not going to cut it because the architecture is wrong. Why do we need to spin up new clusters over and over again? Why can't we share clusters? Well, it's because it's really hard. Similar to pre-virtualization of physical servers, it was really hard to share a server. And virtualization really unleashed that potential and created businesses like AWS. We're doing the same thing for Kubernetes. We introduced a technology called vCluster. It's an open source project, so you find us on GitHub. There's about 40 million virtual clusters that the community has already spun up with our technology. It's open source, it's Apache 2 licensed, really easy to get started with. And the clue is really we're spinning up these virtual clusters on top of real clusters. That means now you need a lot fewer clusters. Instead of having 1,000 or 2,000, you may get away with 10. And then it means you have 10 Istios, 10 Datadogs, etc., right? Instead of thousands of them. It's a lot easier to manage. You have that thin layer of virtualization that locks you into that environment, and that gives you full autonomy while you're inside and restricts you from everything outside. But it allows you to share the underlying stack, right? So similar to a VM, inside I can be root, outside I don't have any access, but I can share certain things on the underlying host. And that makes it a lot more efficient. We typically save over 50% of compute cost for people that switch over to virtual clusters. And our commercial product adds a lot of these enterprise bells and whistles, right? SSO, audit logging, but it also adds additional cost-saving features. For example, turning idle virtual clusters off. Because when you look at a lot of enterprises, they have maybe 3,000 clusters, and you ask them how many of them are currently used today? How many were used last week? It's a difficult question. And how do you scale them down to zero? It's pretty much impossible with real clusters. With virtual clusters, we can put that on autopilot, spin them down every night, every weekend, right? Save additional cost. Our community has been exploding over the past 3 years since we launched this project. And we're generating a ton of revenue. You're seeing on the right-hand side a lot of these logos, multi-million dollars in revenue. We 5x'd our revenue last year. And some of the logos, unfortunately, I can't put there, but biggest car manufacturer, pretty sure you've been in one of their cars. One of the biggest chip manufacturers in the world, pretty sure most of your phones are going to have one of their chips, right? You can imagine who these companies are. But also new cutting-edge companies like CoreWeave that really built the new GPU cloud for AI. They're spinning up virtual clusters for each one of their customers, because that's what they do, right? Handing out GPUs with a compute API. What's the compute API to launch workloads? Kubernetes. And we just announced our Series A led by Khosla Ventures actually last Tuesday. So this is very, very new, very exciting time in the company. We're 35 people. We're actively hiring, including for a VP of marketing. And similar to how GitLab is building their company, we're fully remote. But occasionally, as you can see in these pictures, we get together for fun events like KubeCon, for an offsite to take a hot air balloon ride. So if you want to join us, check out our website. company is called Loft, so you find us at loft.sh. And again, vCluster is the open source project. We have a couple of other open source projects, including DevPod, which is a GitHub Codespace's open source competitor, and you find a ton more on GitHub. We were told to wear something super bright, so I tried to match the wristbands. So find me later on to have a chat. Thanks.